Here goes.
Go for it.
Right. Just for anyone that might be watching this, what is your name?
Garry Anderson.
Garry Anderson. And where do you work?
I work at the Terrace School.
Terrace School. What's your role there?
I'm the principal at the Terrace School.
Okay.
So,
and how long have you been there for?
That's about 22 years.
22 years?
Yes.
All right. That's a good stint.
Yeah. We came to the school and there were 200 pupils in the school when we arrived, and the we meaning my wife's a teacher as well. And Glenys and I arrived, and 200 pupils in the school, and there are 400 now. So there didn't seem to be the pressure to follow that, jumping to bigger schools to achieve. The school seemed to just be growing quite nicely.
Yeah, right.
While we stayed there.
So it's doubled in size. And where and when did you get your teaching degree?
I was in the period of time, I trained at the Dunedin College of Education, which doesn't exist now. It's part of Otago University. And it was a 3-year teacher training course as opposed to a degree course. In those days, primary teachers didn't get degrees. We got diplomas. It took the same amount of time and same amount of study, we would say.
Yeah.
Others would say, no, a degree's a bit harder. But no, we were trained as teachers, and that was from 72 to 74.
Yeah, 72, 74. I did the 3-year teaching degree at Teachers College of Education. Now it's 4 years.
Yes. Yeah.
But, interesting.
Yeah, the difference, I guess, as a principal, we receive trainees and help train trainees from Dunedin, from Wellington, Waikato, Christchurch College. In fact, we have a program, we train Iowa State University teacher trainees, but the thing that strikes me that's different now is that a lot of the practice they get with us is the only close scrutiny they have of what actually a teacher does. I understand the need for the universities to develop their minds, get them to think really deeply about not necessarily the teaching curriculum, but about any area of expertise that they want to study at the university, and then turn themselves into teachers after that. But it does worry me that the specialisation in training as a teacher.
Well, that's the thing. For me personally, I mean, when I went to teacher college, I didn't really go into it wanting to be a teacher at that point. And I'll be honest about it, and I wanted a degree. And I didn't apply myself majorly, but I didn't really learn a lot in saying that at teachers college. The most part I learned was in the postings. Yeah, actually in the school. And my first 6 months teaching in London was where I learned so much. So I think maybe a more practical approach would be much more beneficial to teachers, I think.
Yeah, I think so. We're experimenting a little bit. Young prospective teacher trainees, if you like, who have come over to us to have a look at the school, come over from Dunstan High School, which neighbours us. We've adopted a couple of them as they've gone through the Teachers College with the idea that when they're on their varsity breaks, we give them time in the school. And we pay them to be in the school as teacher aides, but with the knowledge that they'll go on to become teachers, maybe teach for us, but that's not the point of what we're doing. So conscious of the fact that the university work doesn't necessarily prepare them that well for the functional side of teaching that you're talking about in London, or whether it's in Alexandria for that matter.
Yeah. Right. And why did you become a teacher?
Interesting. Like an unusual choice. When I was really keen on going into the Air Force, being a builder and teaching. They were always the three that seemed to go round and round in my mind. But the thing that appealed to me about teaching was, and I know this sounds quite righteous almost, but it was, you can make a difference. Like you can make a difference building a house, I'm sure. And so I guess that appealed to me, doing something like that. Not sure where the Air Force came into it, but no, it was just, I liked the whole concept of what was behind it. I enjoyed sport. I mostly enjoyed school, not necessarily passionate about all of the things about school. And I just like the whole concept behind teaching and being able to work with people and share, in development. And even at that age, I bet I wasn't putting those sort of words on it, but it was that sort of thinking.
Cool. And do you think you could try and give me a description of what you think education is in one sentence? It's quite difficult, but
yeah. I don't think of I don't use that word that often, but I guess if I think of it in a sentence, I then flip it to the words that I generally refer to. So education for me is it's like a process or the act or action that's involved with teaching and learning. And you could take the teaching out if you were considering it only just to mean a teacher teaching you. I mean the environment. So it's a process, and it's the process that teaches us the things, the actions that happen that teach us and that we learn from, good and bad, I guess.
And I suppose it's a good description of what it is, but education, just moving on from that, what does education mean to you personally, maybe, is a better question.
Yeah, to me personally, it's about opportunity. So when you look at a career, because clearly you could tell by the colour of my hair I'm nearing the end of a career, I suppose you would say, not that education or my education will stop with a retirement, say, from my principal's position. But what I think of education is opportunities. So if you're an educationalist, and that's what I would consider myself to be, it's about giving teachers, because of the role I'm in, teachers the opportunity to offer their students. So in your role as a principal, you're giving teachers an opportunity to facilitate learning for children. So when I was a teacher, a long, long time ago, that was me giving children the opportunities to learn. Now, I guess in the role that I've been in for years, it's just a better picture for me, is that I enjoy teaching. I love still teach for an hour a day because I still enjoy that. But it's in my role, it's to make it possible for teachers to do what I enjoyed doing.
So it's all about creating opportunities for teachers and for children.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I don't, from a principal's role, I'm not the ideas man. I'm just the person who can make it possible for the people with the ideas to continue them on, because education's changed over the years, especially in my career. And so I would be probably quite passionate about seeing that the teachers who have the new ideas now have a chance to.
I like that. I think that's really important, and it's great to see someone in your position understand that, or have that as part of your philosophy, because there are new types of education, new ideas. There's a new generation coming. It's changing exponentially. So I think it's great that in your position you can understand that maybe you don't have all the ideas, but you're open to other people bringing in new.
And you do. You don't have all the ideas. You do have some experience that you could look at what someone's saying and say, oh no, we've tried that, it won't work. But you go, no. You hold back on that sort of statement because what they're attempting to do might well have a different spin to what you may have seen in the past, and their passion for it will carry it through, or the tweaking that they've done to it. So from a principal's role, I think that's what you should be doing.
Good. I like to hear that. And in your opinion, what is the key to children's learning?
Their environment. And in saying that, the context they find themselves in, good and bad, like we would wish that their family circumstance or their home circumstance might be perfect. It won't be, and not for all children, but it'll be hugely different for all children. So for teaching, from a school's point of view, is that what you want to create is an environment that sets up sort of the stuff we were talking about before. You set up the opportunity for children to experience things that they will learn from. And in saying that, you want them to experience positive things that they will learn from.
Sure.
So that's...
So it's kind of creating a positive growth type environment. So
when we have a wee saying at the terrace school, when they come through the gates or cross the boundary into the school, we want them to be able to predict how things will be. Because if they can predict that if they're doing something wrong, then Mr. Anderson might growl at them. That's a negative, but you know,
Yeah.
it just because from some of their
Boundaries,
environment, yeah, but it's more than that. It's the environment they're in. Sometimes they have so many anxieties about will this happen because it hasn't been that predictable in their home environment. Some of our children arrive at school where their environment has been really very nurturing, very positive, very predictable for them, and the school carries that on. For those children that haven't had that opportunity, we set up a caring environment where they feel comfortable and they want to be there. And so if you set that up, then the children will trust you. They'll develop a relationship with you, because that was the next key word I was going to throw in.
Yeah.
Because if they've got a relationship with their teacher, then the chances are that they will learn. They'll learn anyway. Children, what's the saying? Children learn in spite of you.
Yeah.
But they'll learn better if they've got a positive relationship with you.
Completely agree. Where I base my kind of philosophy on the relationship that we have with the child.
Yeah.
If you've got a great relationship with the child, you hardly even need to teach them.
Yep. Yep. And they trust you. You build up that trust, and you have to honour that trust though too. That's critical.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just going to check this to see if it's still going, because yes, I think last time I had a malfunction, had to do it again. Anyway, okay, and we're kind of touching on this, but what are the characteristics that make a great teacher?
I think we did touch on it. It's about passion. It's not a job that you can do in order to put your hand out every second Wednesday and collect your pay packet. The joke is, great holidays, great pay. Not so sure about that. But certainly there is reasonable pay, and there's a lot of non-contact time that allows you to recharge your batteries. But yeah, if you're passionate, going back to that comment I made before, when I first went teaching, we were teaching reading, say for instance, children to read, and I had learned about phonics and could passionately teach children to read using a phonetic base to the teaching. But in my latter years of college, they were starting to introduce the concept that reading was more than that, that it was a process, and if you understood the process, phonics would be part of it. And so eventually I became very passionate about the broader concepts of reading. So that didn't mean that I couldn't teach children to read when I was just using the phonetic base. So long as I arrived in the room and was passionately believing that they would learn, there was a good chance. So yeah, the qualities of a good teacher, you've got to be passionate. I think you have to be reasonably resilient. You've got to persevere with things, but also as much as the child you're trying to want them to want to learn, you've got to want to learn yourself, because each child is different. I know that's a well used turn of phrase, but they are, and that goes back to that relationship thing. Is that I guess a quality of a teacher is that they're good with relationships, and they'll be fine as a teacher. Passionate, pretty tough, persevere, and be good in relationships.
Good, I like it. Nature or nurture?
I would have pretty easy answer. It's both. We're given what we're given, and what we do with it is what education does. So you're born with a lot. All of us are born with plenty, and it's what we do with it is the nurture. And it's that doesn't mean that if you're born into an unfortunate circumstance that you can't do anything with it. What you were given by nature will evolve and develop because you were given whatever you were given. But I'm sort of blithering a bit around that. It's neither one nor the other.
And I suppose it kind of leads nicely into a school environment that you're trying to create. The kids have got the tools. You just need to support the growth of those.
Yep. And it's one of those things. I'll make a political statement now. Is that we are almost hell-bent, say for instance, on wanting, every so often we get driven back to the belief that if you turn 7 within the same 12 months, that you can all learn the same thing. Well, nature didn't deliver it up like that for a start. So there's the nature-nurture one comes into it. The child will learn, but all of those 7-year-olds, and remember there will be 12 months difference between them, sometimes even more than that in the education system, they're not the same height, they're not the same gender, they're not the same ethnicity. What's another political thing? They don't have the same shoe size, and yet we believe they should all be able to learn the same stuff. No, they won't.
Exactly that. And yeah, I'm supposed we'll lead into this during, but national standards, man, you should be at this level. And it's a little bit crazy. I think we can get into that. And how much of a role does school play in the overall development of a child? I suppose, being in your position, you'd have to say...
Actually, funny you should say that. No. When I thought about that when I saw the question, and I thought, well, it's not as much as what people think.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah, I love the whole idea, with my wife being a new entrant teacher. Glennis receives children in a New Zealand school. You receive them on their 5th birthday. The day they turn 5, they start school. And so they've already bought 5 years, or you could say 5 years and 9 months of development to the classroom. And some of them will have behaviours like an average 5-year-old might have. Some of them will have behaviours like a 3-year-old. Some will have behaviours like a 7-year-old. One of the jokes that I often say is that as the child arrives at school, that will be determining then, the year they arrive will determine what class they will be in for the rest of their education in the New Zealand education system. It shouldn't determine what they're going to be taught, because young Ben arrives along at school, he can already read, so Glennis, the new entrant teacher, says, well, Ben, just pop over in the corner for a while, would you? Because I need to teach these others to read. You can. So we don't do that. We say, well, Ben can read, and so that means he needs to learn the next stages in the process. So that's why I'm quite passionate about, when children arrive at school, they'll bring whatever they've brought to the school, and we will take them on from there.
But you say there's some pretty big building blocks, the base of those first
there's some
5 to 6 years,
damaging comment or research that would suggest that by the time they're 3, a lot of this is already determined, and that would sort of suggest, well, you're wasting your time then, aren't you, Gary? No, the school can have an impact, but for those who think it has a huge impact, no, we're only taking children on from what they're already arriving with. And if you did the maths on it, I suppose you'd go, we would have them 5 hours in the classroom, 1 hour for lunch in our care, and there's an awful lot left of the time that they're awake. So we do have an impact, but not at the level that people possibly believe.
Good, good to hear, actually. So with in mind the way that the world is going in the massive changing environment that's rapidly changing, if the curriculum was limited to 3 subject areas, what would they be?
Not to be trapped, and I'll give a very political answer. No, I'd go, we need to be teaching children values, beliefs, and I'd stick to values because beliefs evolve.
Good work.
So that would be the starting point. I believe that we should be developing positive behaviours. So you've got your values, belief systems evolving, and you should be helping them show behaviours, learn behaviours that would reinforce the values and give them an opportunity to expand on those. And knowledge. Because you go, oh, right, I could have said, reading, writing and maths, critical. I could have talked about key competencies, the stuff from what I'm quoting as the New Zealand curriculum. But they fit under the values, the behaviours and the knowledge. So if you push me into a corner and said pick the 3, that would be it, because it gives me an out in so many different directions anyway.
You're right.
because without the knowledge, they don't get depth to their values and their beliefs, and without understanding how behaviour develops and being able to develop behaviours that support their values and beliefs, then it's not much use anyway.
I really, I love that you've gone straight for values, because there's a question about that.
Right.
But my personal view on it is that primary school should be a space where we're creating little humans who have the capacity to interact with others, communicate, who can start positive relationships with people, maintain them, and realise their effects on other people and that's all based on values, isn't it?
Correct.
So I'm stoked that you said that. I think there should be a much bigger focus on those values as opposed to maybe the other stuff. Create great humans first, and then they're going to learn no matter what. Goes back to saying what you say, the base is there before they come to school. Yeah. So that they're going to learn in a certain way anyway, probably. But then we support them in creating good values.
Yeah. If you even go into that, once you're into values, it's got so much depth to it. Is that when that 5-year-old arrives at the school, we value their inquiring, they're inquisitive. They want to learn. Yeah. And if as the saying goes, you watch the school stamp that out of them. And the school shouldn't, of course, because if the school is valuing respect, caring, inclusion, all of those things, then they are great for children. And reading, writing, and maths is fine. That'll just help them get more depth. Yeah, and they'll learn that.
Good. If you were to change something about today's education system, what would it be?
Pretty easy one, really. And I don't know if that's answering your question, but I'd like to see politics taken out of education.
Great.
I understand, I believe in democracy. It has its flaws, but one of the flaws is that you can use critical things like health, education, as a platform to get yourself populist election for 3 or 4 years.
Exactly.
And so education, if you're not careful, keeps getting turned on its head and the priorities reprioritised on the whim of politics, as opposed to I don't know, this is a utopia more than anything else, that if the politicians go, no, we will leave education aside, we'll take that out of the political debate and trying to win votes through that, and we'll go, bipartisan, that education will be dealt with differently. I suppose the health people would say, we want the same for health as well.
Yeah, for sure. It makes sense.
Yeah, well, you've got to understand, though, too, is that the politicians are the ones that are asked to run the country in a particular way, and that includes education. But to me, a lot of the difficulties that we have progressing some of what I would believe the better, deeper thinking in education are stymied by political needs. And so you mentioned national standards before. If schools didn't have we had a New Zealand curriculum that had expectations of children's learning, and then they invented national standards. It seemed to me that was politically expedient to say, we'll give this to schools and we'll make education better. No, education already had standards, and so it was just a political show, and still is probably a political show, but at least it's some of us can deal with it and move on. Others are still trapped by it.
And it's funny because you kind of find it that there's people who are making decisions about education who haven't set foot in a classroom.
Or the other way around, it worries me that education is one of those things in our society that everyone has experienced. So they believe they understand education. So I might I'll go and play golf today, and somebody who finds out that I'm a principal of a school, they'll inevitably, somewhere in the conversation, will say, we just whacked those kids like we used to do, Gary, it would sort things out. And that's their belief, is that education's gone soft. You know, and so that's how they understood that they had learned.
Yep.
They haven't looked broader at what was maybe happening there.
For sure.
Because I was brought up and was being hit if I didn't have my spelling right, was being hit if I didn't behave right. But I don't agree with it. But people have been in education, and people in politics maybe are still hankering back to things that they think worked for them.
Exactly.
The
and
world's
there's an
moved
old
on.
style education system that created workers, but it's changed since back in the day.
Oh, without a doubt. I think I could easily have taught you, Ben, if you'd come to the terrace school, but we would want our children to be more adaptable, more resilient was the word I used before. And so you give them opportunities to develop that. Whereas, as you say, previously you were preparing them for a job. You thought.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting what the jobs of the next 5 years are going to be, which we probably
they do say, like, I laugh, one of my favourite pet hates, if you like, now is that people say, research shows. And I hope that we're educating our children now to challenge research shows.
Perfect.
Because we've been using research shows now for too long. And the
it's
research
an excuse to say something.
Research shows this. Well, I've got other research that shows the total opposite.
And you can probably look at the same detail data from that research and have other conclusions from it.
Yeah, and the point I was making though too is that what's one of the other pet sayings now, the jobs that our children will be doing, when they leave school haven't been invented yet. Well, that's one that they've bandied around now for about, I think I heard that about 20 years ago. But there are still teachers, there are still policemen, there are still lawyers, there are still doctors. What they're doing in those jobs is different.
Different completely.
And we would expect that the education that they have developed, or the attitudes that they've developed when they were being educated, will mean that they will be receptive to the changes in teaching, doctoring, lawyering, and those things.
They support their capacity to problem solve, to make mistakes on the way and change. And
firefighters will still fight fires. Hopefully they've learned from the mistakes of the past and fight them better.
Perfect. Good one. So I think you've mentioned a couple just before, but what are the core values that children should learn at school?
I'd start with caring and respect. If you got those, like, I would say that if a child learns what it means to treat others the way they would like to be treated, they're well on the way. Those are the values that to me comes around.
It's been used a whole lot, that term, but it's great, isn't it? If we could teach that, and the children can think about that as they're acting in some way. Would I like to be treated like that?
My environment, you go, that's about the personal stuff. No, it's also about the way they treat their environment. It's that care and respect, that if you help them practice behaviours that show that they can treat others the way they would like to be treated, that goes back to that part of my curriculum that I was saying before. Teach them behaviours.
And that leads perfectly into this. I'm interested in about empathy in children, and so that's about action reaction, thinking about having respect for the other and understanding how your actions affect them and putting yourself in their shoes. Do you think it can be taught?
Most definitely, Well, it shouldn't be that forthright, but someone will prove me wrong in the future. But we've just gone through a Christmas period, and we've had lots of young mums and dads in and around the house here at Christmas time with their 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, right through to an 11-year-old. And we've watched those children, one grow through to 11, the other through to 10, and I watched those really good mums and dads working with their children. They're teaching them that. Those are the things. I watched the older children looking out for the younger children when they're tearing around outside here and climbing in the trees, or helping them have a turn, that sort of thing. And nature, nurture, don't know, but certainly I've watched the parents expect their children to understand the other one. No, it's his turn. No, that's not fair.
Yeah.
Those turns of phrase come through, so the children are learning that.
Yeah. And going back to what you were talking about before is, you know, the nature nurture coming. The children come with certain. They come from a certain environment, so certain structures in the way they are. So in school, having school 5 hours a day, 5 hours of contact time, with a child that, you know, might not have such empathy in their household and doesn't have an environment, can we teach it in that environment?
Yep. It's you're pushing it uphill a little bit.
Yeah.
But if you, what is it? The research says that 20%. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
That 20% of our children will struggle with those sorts of things. That 20% will go to prison. You know, all of these things are predetermined. But if I pinch some other research, 1 in 10 can break the mold.
Yeah.
And so that's what I guess teachers are hanging out for, is that if we do nothing, then the 1 in 10 isn't going to happen. Yeah. So the 10% aren't going to get a chance.
So as teachers, we have to believe that we can teach
correct.
empathy.
Yep.
Good. Oh, that's great. Good work there. Did you have a favourite teacher at school?
Yeah, probably. Can
you remember one?
I can remember lots of teachers. Sadly, not too many primary school teachers, but I believe that's the way of it. Is that? But I can remember, say for instance, he was an older guy. He was the principal of a school, but he was a teacher. He was went to Marist School, and it was a Marist brother Bernard, and I particularly remember him. And he hit kids. Yep. But that was what they believed they were supposed to do.
At the time, that's what that was part of it.
But he read to us. He took us for all the sports I had. He was a great gymnastics coach, a great rugby coach. He gave us, the children in his class, time. Now you go, oh yeah, but he was, dedicated. He was a Marist brother dedicated to that. Yeah, well, he was, but he had an impression because of that. Yeah. And he had the most amazing choir. So he was a man of many talents. Yeah. And I guess in his time, he was regarded as a pretty good teacher, or a great teacher, and he led the school. So he had an impression on me because I was in his choir. Yeah. Some might laugh at that. I was in his choir. Yeah. I was in his rugby teams, and in his gymnastics group, and so but I also used to just love sitting in his class. I think there were 52 of us in his room. We all sat and faced the front and did what we were told, but he would read to us, and I can remember the stories that he read. He was creative. He was my teacher when lotteries had the first £1 million, it would have had to have been, lottery? No, maybe that's too generous. But anyway, I can remember the creative writing activity. We all brought along a shilling or whatever and bought a ticket, and he pinned it on the wall, and we used to write about it. So that was in my Form 1 year. Wow. So when I was what we would call nowadays Year 7. Yeah. So I'd be 11 turning 12 when this guy did those things. Now I can think of other teachers that had those sort of impacts, but I can list more of what Brother Bernard did.
Right. So you would say that he's had a pretty big impact on you as a person, but probably you as a teacher and even more so a principal.
Yeah, interesting that. I never thought of that until I started to talk about him. I remember he was actually the principal of the school as well. Yeah. So he probably did. Like, I didn't think of it like that. I think you're pretty selfish at that age.
Of course.
His impact on you. Yeah. But it was significant.
Yeah. Are there any things that you can think that maybe you can pinpoint? It was like this was his action, his time that he spent with the children, because he's obviously spent a lot of time with kids. If he was the gymnastic coach, and is there anything in particular that you can kind of point out that?
I don't know. Everything was well organised. Like the rugby team, for instance, in those days, it sounds crazy, but even in a primary school, there was a first 15,
Yeah.
and he coached the first 15. And on Friday, you trained on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then on Friday the players assembled in front of his class, which was the main class down where all of the school normally assembled, and he presented you with your jersey and your socks for the weekend. If you were, you know, and you had your number on your jersey. So everything was very, it was formal, but it was informal. Like I can remember him teaching us gymnastics, and he could individualise stuff. It had to be in gymnastics. Whereas in rugby, he got a great team response, but I think I was halfback in that team, and he didn't want me to wind up my pass. So I can remember me having to pass the rugby ball. He would put it hard up against underneath a chair, or it was one of those rostrum things, and just pass it straight from there. So yeah, there were things he thought about. I guess when I reflect on him now, from my own teaching background, I can understand his hitting kids because they believed that was that was what worked.
That's part of
but and he was doing pretty well, given that there were 52 in his class.
52 is a big class.
Yeah, well, I suppose that was the way. We were jammed tight into what would be just a normal classroom size, but we were all, to a point, we were all being taught the same stuff. But that was what they... And there's one of the sad parts of the education system then, and he was part of that, is that, what was my story? I often tell this one. On a Friday, you had the spelling test, and all 52 of us had the same words. And before you went out to play, the ones that had got spelling wrong got hit. Up to 6 whacks with the cane on your hand for every word that you spelt wrong. And I remember this day when I got something wrong, because I was one of those goody two-shoes, I suppose, and never got anything. Or no, nature. I was born able to spell reasonably well. But anyway, this day I got one wrong, and I stood in the line of kids waiting for my turn to get belted, and he stood up on the front of the room, and each child would go up, put their hand out, and he'd belt you on the hand, and he stopped the cane right over the top of my hand and said, "Hi, Anderson, you never get anything wrong, out you go." And the funny thing about it, my good mate behind me, who shall remain nameless, he would be up there every Friday getting belted. Now as a teacher I'll go, well, I wish that guy had realised that Ollie shouldn't have been learning the same words as I was learning, because we were different. And so...
Well, it's good to see that we've moved on from that.
Well, yeah, and I guess he was doing stuff then that was
exactly. I mean, and that was and that was accepted. But there's obviously, you know, teaching team sports. He had an idea for the whole team as a collective, but also individual, teaching you how to do individual schools.
And that personal pride thing, you know, the mana that went with being in a team and playing for your mates. He was big on that. Pretty special in that.
Cool, good one. Do you have any sort of teaching philosophy that may differ from the norm? That's a little bit different.
Probably not. You'd have to know what other people's philosophies, and I don't. I love what I do, and that's not different. And we do, like even when people come shopping as they do nowadays, young parents or parents arriving in Alexandra will go shopping for schools. And I can't give them a hard sell for the terrace school because I haven't studied what the other schools are doing, nor would I want to, of course. I can just tell them what I know our school does, so I can't answer that, I guess. Is that I don't think we do anything too dramatically different. What I do enjoy is the little trips that we have a lot of exposure to Iowa State University or Iowa State's education system because of the young teachers or teacher trainees that come to us every year. And so when they see what we do, they like what we do, and our perception is that things like the individualizing of teaching, even to the point where we individualize and take it to the next step and personalize it, they go, a lot of schools call it individualization or differentiation is the more common turn of phrase. When my wife and I were in Iowa State, lucky enough to be there a couple of years ago, and we were showing them that as they get better at individualising, you'll then personalise it, because you'll understand the child more. You'll allow the child a bit more freedom to go and explore things that they're passionate about themselves, in the knowledge that you know the curriculum and what they're supposed to be learning, and you'll be able to manipulate that into whatever their passion was. And so if that's different, and apparently from Iowa, they say they like what they're seeing, and we'll go, well, maybe that is different. And of course we go to birthday parties in Australia for our grandchildren, and as soon as they realise that Glenys, these are the other young mums and dads that are there, when they realise Glenys and I are Kiwi teachers, they're fascinated by that one we talked about before, starting children at 5. And so if that's different to other parts of the world, and I believe it is, I would want that to remain part of our philosophy, and that is, when Ben arrived at school as a 5-year-old, he got taught what Ben needed to be taught, not what. And so that's, so you don't know if that's different too.
And that leads me to think about, I've been studying a little bit of the Finland education system, and they don't teach the kids anything formal before the age of 7. It's all games and play up until that point. What do you think of that?
Yeah, without knowing and going and watching it happen and then seeing the end results, it's it'd be interesting. It would, because the way children learn in a new entrant classroom in a school like the Terrace, it's formal, but it's fun. It's activities based. I've watched, for instance, mathematics. There are so many in my teaching and even my pupil career where there's new maths and more new maths has come in. And really, when you analyse what they're trying to do with mathematics, when I look at what each of the new revolutions, if you like, that were introduced, it was trying to get children to be activity based with their mathematics, game based, if you like. Like I think of the children who at home have played endless games of cards, monopolies, ludos, all of that. They'll be great wee mathematicians, and so we're mimicking that in schools. So you don't have to wait. You don't have to formalise the rule and say, well, we're not going to teach them anything until they're 7. You could actually start sooner than that. It's how you do it. Yeah. So I'd love to go and see though, because there's a lot of positive information coming out of Finland, but then all the data, if you like, you better analyse it, because New Zealand isn't Finland.
And there's a different context.
People, you're right. It's the environment, the New Zealand environment for our children. It will be dramatically different to Finland.
And I think it's important to look at these other education systems around the world, but you can take bits and pieces from it, but it's definitely a context thing.
I have a wee smile to myself. I believe Finland has taken politics out of education. It's a bipartisan approach to education. You go, maybe that's why. Maybe it's not the formality of the education till 7. Maybe it's just the fact that they're all committed to well-trained teachers. I think it's something, teachers that are valued. And but you're right. You've got to go and see. Like, I could have easily made sweeping statements about American education. Well, I've been to America, and each part of America is so dramatically different. Australia's the same. It's just a smaller version. That in Melbourne alone, there's the whole population of New Zealand. So so we should be watching and learning.
For
not
sure.
Judging.
Great, Garry. This is I've really enjoyed this, and there's some great nuggets of information there for myself and for anybody that wants to watch it. And maybe I can come back and do it again next year and
see if things have changed.
Yeah.
Well, you probably tell. Get teachers talking about teaching, and You can't hardly stop them.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, we could go down a rabbit warren and make this go for 4 hours. But anyway, I'll leave it there. But thank you, Garry.
Yeah.
Cheers.